Programming Throwdown, episode 47. Ruby, take it away, Jason.
Hey, everybody. We have a cool episode coming up on Ruby. We also have a lot of interesting questions and feedback and a lot of mail. Actually, the mail has gone up by, maybe a factor of like 5 or something?
A lot.
Factor
There's a lot of new
lot.
people out here. We don't know where you came from, but welcome.
Actually, if you guys just shoot us a email or post on Facebook or G+, tell us where you found, if you're new to the show, let us know where you came from. Because we got a ton of people in the show very recently, at least based on the emails and our very loose hand-wavy statistics. And so, let us know. We're curious. So, cool. So, one of the emails we got is from Yaroslav Piskorsky. Sorry if I messed that up. But so I don't know if he's a statistician, but he knows a lot more about statistics than Patrick and I do combined. And he added a lot of information on R. One of the things about R that we didn't know is that the syntax in R, and for people who don't know, R was the language we covered last month.
Episode 46.
That's right. So the syntax of R is almost identical to the syntax in statistics textbooks. So you can open up a statistics textbook, take some equations from that, and almost type them verbatim in R, which is pretty cool. Also, he mentions a lot of things R does. There's a lot of the things, there's overlap there with MATLAB and with NumPy and SciPy, but they're worth mentioning. They're interesting, and so definitely go to programmingthrowdown.com, check out our blog, and go to the R episode. He has a ton of information there. If you're into R, and you're a statistician,
did he post it in
especially,
a comment, or did you post up his comment?
He posted it in a comment.
Oh, okay.
Actually, we'll link to his comment from this show.
Ooh, that's meta.
Yeah, look out. That's like it's like Inception or something. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Definitely check it out. A lot of interesting stuff. Another question we got, this is from Ash Booth, and he was saying, basically, what's the difference between kind of doing projects in school and working in industry? Wow, like where do we begin, right?
There's no difference.
Yeah, right. So, I'll say a couple of things. When most of the projects that you do in school are individual. And so depending on the scope of the project, if you're doing like a PhD dissertation that takes 4 years, then you probably have some kind of source control and things like that. But even still, like if you're developing by yourself or with, 1 or 2 other people, you don't really have to document. You don't have to write a lot of tests because hopefully both of you or the 3 of you have most of the same assumptions, and the code doesn't have to live for a very long time. And so definitely when you're working in industry, you have to program very defensively because there's a lot of people on the team. There's people on other teams who could break your code. And sometimes you write tests to make sure that other people can't break your code. So that's something to think about is, actually someone put this really good in a really clever way. They said, if you're in industry, your code has to be peer reviewed. So presumably 1 or 2 people have to look at your code. So right off the bat, your code has been read, 3 times more than it's been written. It's been written once and read 3 times. And that's before it even gets committed, right? And after that, it's just going to get read even more. And so your coding in that environment is very different than coding in school.
Yep. You pretty much summarized what I would say. But yeah, I think the big difference between school and industry is your projects tend to be very short-lived. And you tend to almost never use existing code. So you tend to almost what we call, I guess, greenfield, like code where you're starting from scratch.
Yep.
Versus in industry, on the whole, you're very rarely doing that. And even at some point, even if you started that way, after 6 months of working on something, it's no longer that way. And so you have a lot more maintenance, a lot more digging into code bases you're unfamiliar with or have been unmaintained. And that's something that you don't really get experience with in school, at least not in my schooling. They never gave us like a huge code base and said, here, go fix something or add a new feature. The closest we got was for our operating systems class, we needed to add a feature to the BSD kernel.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so we had to actually dig through and understand it at some level to be able to add it. And that was pretty representative of the work that you end up doing a lot. Also, for me, I didn't do graduate work. So I got a master's degree, but it was mostly just normal classes. I didn't do any research. And so for me, the projects also tended to be much, much smaller, and I didn't work on them 8 hours a day for literally months, years.
Yep. Yeah,
which
think
can be
about
very
that.
common at work.
Like, yeah, I mean, you could work the same job for 10 years, and you could literally be staring at the same code, 40 hours a week for 10 years. So, I mean, hopefully, it's you don't have to keep coming back to that code, but you'll be building on top of that for years to come. So, or if not you, someone else will, right? So.
And then you said about peer review as a reason for writing it well or whatever. But I mean, that's something else that's really big difference. And many places have some form of peer review or needing unit tests even. And this is something I never did other than theoretically in school. You may have to write unit tests for the unit test portion of some class, but it wasn't something we did for realsies.
Yep.
But in work, I do it for realsies.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, if I don't write, this has happened to me where I don't write a unit test and then another team that we're sharing the code base just breaks my code. And it's not that they're jerks or anything. It's just that they invalidated some of the assumptions I made. And without unit tests, there was no way for them to know they did that, right? Cool. So our last question, Quang Nguyen asked, basically, what are our thoughts on programming competitions? So Patrick and I have both done programming competitions. One thing I can say, so the situation's like this. Programming competition, in terms of your time, right? Like I spent, I spent maybe 2,000 or 3,000 hours working on programming competitions, like either practicing, going to competitions, doing online competitions. I spent like probably more than 3,000 hours. If I had spent that much time doing work on open source projects or modifying the BSD kernel or something like that, it would have made me a better software engineer, right? But the coding competitions make you a better interviewee. And so both are, you could argue about whether the interview process is broken because of that. A lot of people say that. And I don't disagree. I don't really know what we could do better. But the fact is, at least right now, coding competitions will allow you to pass interviews that you would not have otherwise passed. But, again, taking that same time and putting it into working with a big team, using source control and things like that would make you a better engineer. So yeah, use that information however it best suits you.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact question, so I don't know if we're answering it or not. But on that topic, it is true that I think there are two aspects to coding competitions. One is doing stuff at speed. So like making a stab or guess or, doing the big O approximation of a potential thing and understanding what the impact of that will be off the cuff. Thinking of an algorithm and implementing it sort of correct at least the first time. Like these things at speed are really great for working on a programming interview. Mm-hmm. The second part is like the algorithms, like actually learning various algorithms and tricks and data structures and understanding like, when you're in grade school and they give you those word problems and you have to learn that certain words mean addition, certain words subtraction, certain multiplication, like learning those keywords, like how to take a guess at what the data structure might be. I think those are two different parts, and the algorithms part has some usefulness outside, like learning what all these algorithms are and when to apply them and how to apply them. Is more generally useful long term. the coding at speed is really good up into a certain point, and then the diminishing curve kicks in really hard.
Right.
So like once you can do it fast and you're familiar with all the standard libraries of the language you choose to use, and you can sort of get done in the time frames that the competitions normally have, getting much faster will make you do better in the competition, but not in real life.
Right. That makes sense.
Even for a programming interview, I don't think it really matters. You don't have to have super speed. You just have to be quick, but not fast.
Yeah. So maybe the best advice here is, especially for people in college and things like that, is to be like decent at Top Coder and these other sites, but you don't have to be great. Maybe that's.
Yeah, I would think like the way I would view it, so to use Top Coder specifically, is I think it's valuable to get to the point where, be honest with yourself, like on the easier, there's like an easier mode and a harder mode, or easier level and a hard level. Is like on the easier level, you really should be solving the easy one correct the first time, the easiest question. The middle question you should be getting right in the time frame, and you should often get the hard one right. And all of that within the time frame that they set for you, so you can do like practice competition or whatever.
Yeah,
but it isn't important that you get it the absolute fastest.
Well, what? I don't know about you, but so for me to do one of the hard ones, it takes me about a full day.
on the easy one.
Oh, you're talking about the easy division.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think the hard division gets into competitiveness. So you should be able to do the easy one, but the easy one on the hard one is typically, that's so confusing. The level 2 easy one is typically the level 1 medium one.
Yeah, just to recap. So there's 2 divisions in Top Coder.
I'm confusing people.
There's Division 2, which is, think of it like the minor leagues. And Division 2 has, it's fine. Division 2 has easy, medium, and hard. And they typically, although not always, but they typically take the hard Division 2 problem and make it the easy Division 1 problem. And then now there's another medium and hard in Division 1. I don't know too much about Division 2, but in Division 1, I've never gotten a hard problem right in the 90 minutes that they give you. And I've only gotten hard problems right. I mean, the lowest time has been something like 5 hours for me to get a hard problem right. So there's definitely
but I'm saying I would go further. But you actually did. So I did competition too, but you did a lot more than me. But that's what I was saying. Like, I don't actually think Division 1 is necessary at all. Right. I think you need to be able to do Division 2 in the time frames they give you as like are you doing well enough?
Yep. I think
that's sufficient.
We talked about this in an earlier episode, but one of the things, kind of going back against what I said earlier, playing, I guess, devil's advocate against myself. One of the things that programming competitions do give you is an ability to look at problems and kind of eyeball how difficult they are.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. Maybe I said it poorly.
Yeah, like you see, like
an approximate estimate, like just a swag at it, like this is really easy.
Like at Top Coder, it's explicit. Like you just see this problem, and it might. Like there's
that's
this
not
one
true
problem.
Because sometimes like the hard one and the medium one are similar in difficulty.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
And it's
that's
better to do the
mistake.
hard one first.
Yeah, well, in Div 2 that might be. Yeah, in Div 1 the hard one's almost always impossible. Like to do in 90 minutes, it's like always some math or statistics trick, and you've either memorized all the tricks. The people I know who get the hard ones right are people who have just memorized a ton of number theory tricks and theorems, and they just see it and they know, okay, that's this theorem, let me start coding. And for the rest of us plebeians, it's like impossible. But yeah, to Patrick's point, I mean, you can look at a certain problem and say, your boss can come to you and say, okay, we need to get this, access time down to 10 milliseconds. Is there some kind of caching or something we could do? And you could look at that and say, yeah, that's doable, or that's going to take years, and it might not even happen, right? So, like we could like write some function to do that, or there's a bunch of heuristics we need to, do data science and figure out if we can, if there's some trick in the data or something, right? So yeah. Anyways, that's sort of long-winded answer. The answer is yes, they help, but
only to a point.
Yeah, only to a certain extent.
But that's true of most things in life.
That's right. It's actually an uncanny valley. If you are in the top maybe 50 people in the world on Top Coder, then now you're like kind of pseudo famous, and that's great. If you're anywhere between there and like the bottom 50 percentile, it doesn't matter. and then anything from there to maybe the bottom 1 percentile is better than nothing. So, anyways, your mileage may vary.
Yep. Okay. Although I found that a lot of the nasty tricks I learned in coding competition helped me to be really fast at debugging code on the fly, like just hacking print statements in or whatever is necessary in a loop to just get something out. And you learn like how to make the compiler be quiet and just like how do I force with the minimal lines of code to get it to do what I want.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that
and you would never code that way. Like I would never check in code that way. But when I'm writing test code or debugging something, like people always look at me and like, what? You can do that? It's like, sure, you can cast this thing that way. You shouldn't, but you can.
Yep. Yeah, I think that it's sort of like those people who actually worked in a newspaper who have to produce a newspaper every week. They just have a ton of tricks that if you just wanted to write an article yourself, like they could write it 10 times faster. And it's because they were put in a position where they had to write an article in 30 minutes and they just figured out how to get it done. And it's usually things that go against your intuition that you would think are kind of bad, but they really work. And it's the same with coding. There's just like hideous things that never make it into the final product, but are stepping stones to being very efficient.
Yeah. All right.
Cool.
Time for the news.
So first news article is something we talked about on last month's show.
Yeah, last. Yeah.
But it's this article goes into a lot of detail on it. The title of the article is Amazon's $23.7 million book about flies. And basically this guy is I think a biologist or ethnomologist. I don't know, he studies insects. And he wanted to buy this book. The book typically retails for around $40. And these two sites, they each had it for $300. And he said, that's kind of ridiculous. And he went to send the link to somebody else. And by the time he sent it to them, the book was worth on like $400. And then that really kind of got his attention. So sure enough, after a month or so, the book was worth $23.5 million. And it's just a $40 book. And at the very end, it ends up being worth like $40 again. But this is all about sort of, he actually deconstructed the algorithms.
Well, so he found they were increasing by a set factor.
Right.
So like one was under, one was over. Like one was trying to be the cheapest by some margin, but only a little margin. And the other was trying to be slightly more expensive than that one.
Yep.
Yeah, and so it just had this race condition. Well, race condition is not the right word. But
yeah, it was like an unstable equilibrium. So one of them increases the price 20%. The other one increases the price 19%. And then the first one, sees that increase and increases the price 20%. It just keeps going until a book, $40 book is worth $20 million.
Yeah. And then eventually someone realizes it's crazy and just manually resets the price lower.
Yep. Yeah, they must have humans in the loop that look at, everything that's retailing for more than 20 million and do something manual. I mean,
I was trying to think if there's a way to exploit this behavior, but I don't think there. I mean, you could make people's prices be driven up, but it doesn't really matter. They just won't sell the book.
Well, I thought about this, right? What if you lie to Amazon and say you have the book for $1? Wouldn't that make them lower the price?
Yes, except then if someone buys it in that time period.
That's right. Yeah, you have to. That's the problem, right? You have to say I have the book for $1, hoping that there aren't that many people buying books on flies. But then maybe they would buy your book. Now you're kind of in trouble. Like the people who are selling the $23 million book would buy your book.
And there might be people out there, which I would not be surprised, but I've never heard of it, who are like watching for, like they historically track books with enough, like this one's probably rare enough where they don't, but books with enough volume or just anything with enough volume. And they look for used price discrepancies. And if it's a big enough discrepancy, they buy it.
Right.
And then,
Yep.
essentially try to sell it back. Like there are people on eBay that do that, search for misspellings of words.
Yep.
So like or certain like old objects that people don't know what they are. So they say like, oh, I found this weird bottle opener. And it turns out it's not a bottle opener. It's an antique surgical instrument.
Right.
But if you search like weird iron bottle opener, you find these really rare collectible, whatever.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I think the answer is yes, you could take advantage of it, but you will probably get in trouble and get yourself in a sticky situation. So,
yeah, maybe.
Especially if it's about flies. So
don't buy books about flies. That's the moral of that story.
Right, exactly.
So the next article is a regex1.com, which is an interactive tutorial for learning regular expressions online. So Jason actually found this article, and I find that this is going to be awesome. I am going to try this tomorrow because I stink at regular expressions. I'm a big fan of the quote, what is it? If there's a problem and you solve it with regular expressions, congratulations, you now have 2 problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so this is actually a listener request. So Nicholas Baring sent an email saying, hey, can you talk about regular expressions? And so this is for you, Nicholas. We're talking about regular expressions. I'm also in the same boat as Patrick here, where every time I need to use regex, I always have to fudge my way through it online, and I get it wrong 9 times, and then on the 10th time, it finally does what I want. And it's one of these things, like, I think it'd be good for me to just bite the bullet and like dive into regex for a week, and then get to the point where I could just write the regex correct the first time. So yeah, I'll also be trying this website. The next one is interesting. Things I was unprepared for as a lead developer. So, most teams, the way they're structured, is you have your team and you have a manager who typically manages, maybe, 10 or 15 people. And then you have a tech lead who is in charge of maybe, 2 or 3 people. And the tech lead typically also, writes code himself, versus the manager typically just manages. So this person moved from a established company to a startup. At the startup, he was lead developer, and this is just sort of like a monologue, sort of like a diary about his experiences as lead developer, specifically things he didn't expect. And I thought this was really fascinating. So it's definitely worth reading. Yes. I won't spoil it, but
no, go ahead. No.
Well, yeah, I'll spoil it. So the one that really stuck out to me was, as lead developer, you're in the trenches, and so you spend a lot of time with the developers. But at the same time, you're given sort of a more high level vision. And so in his case, he's at this startup. And so he's learning things like, if this product isn't successful or if it has severe bugs, then they're going to shut down the startup. And so the people that he's managing, like all of them are just going to be out of a job. And then one of his employees comes to him and asks him if he can, learn Ruby on the side. And he wants to do that. But in the back of his mind, he's thinking like, dude, our startup's going to die in a month if we don't get this done, and you're asking me if you want to learn Ruby on the side. But again, his job as the lead developer is to insulate his team so that they don't have to worry about the startup going under or whatever, right? So part of that is answering that question rationally, pretending like he doesn't feel all this other gravity, and then saying, yeah, go ahead and learn Ruby. It's not a big impact on the team, or no, you can't learn Ruby right now. Not, what are you doing? The whole company's going to die, right? So I think that sort of, in a nutshell, is a lot of his issues, is sort of walking this sort of double life, leading this double life. So it's definitely interesting. Highly recommend reading it. So
the next article I have is actually not that important. Sounds weird. Anyways, it's about the JetBrains developers of IDEs, and they changed their licensing, or originally changed their licensing and changed it back because they changed their mind. Anyways, I want to use this as an opportunity to rant about why everything is going to web-based subscription licenses. So JetBrains originally announced this. So before you could buy, a license to the software for a flat fee, then they were going to, now you need to pay a monthly subscription in order to have your software. And if you stop paying it, you don't own it anymore. And the companies tend to think this is good for you as an individual. But in all the cases I tend to look at it, it seems bad to me. So the problem is they're collecting subscription fees, which is great. And as far as that, like if I only want to use it once in a while, I can pay a subscription fee and then stop using it and stop paying, which is nice. And it sounds cheaper up front. But then the fact that like long term, I don't own it. And if I stop paying, I lose it, is not great for me. And also, if there's new versions of a software release, the company needs to, they don't constantly improve the version I have because they're not really incentivized to. So that's kind of bad. But they're really incentivized to make it awesome for the next one, or I don't pay again. And when you go to a subscription model, it's a little loosey-goosey to me as to far as like why would they continue to give updates at an awesome rate? Because you're paying to use it, you really like it, you need to keep using it, and it's not like if you stop paying, you just stop getting new features. You lose access.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so a couple of things about this. One, BitTorrent Sync, which I had as a tool to show a while ago, they had a subscription model for the Pro version, and I never bought it because there's something about subscription models. It's sort of like, I think it's a psychological thing, but you just, actually, I'll get to that later because there's a whole separate rant about that. But they switched to a one-time purchase model. I think it's just $50 now, and I bought it immediately. So I mean, they went from not getting anything from me and me doing everything I could to use the free version and get the most out of it to like them just immediately getting $50. I see the other side of it though, which is they're basically never going to get money from me again. So that but is kind of the problem. Who cares?
Because like for BitTorrent Sync, they don't have a maintenance cost. So why should they continue to get money from you?
That's true. Yeah. So presumably now they should use all of these $50 investments to build another product that they didn't sell.
Who cares?
Well, they have to keep their company going, right? Presumably.
Sure. I mean, if they want to, right? But they could just make a product and be done. Like, that's okay too.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, you would like them to keep it updated, right? And they want to continue to make sales. It probably is worth it to them to keep it maintained because then people will keep buying the existing version at least.
Right.
But what I'm saying is like, for people that run a service or a server and there's cost to it, I understand, right? Like you have costs. To keep this thing up, I have to pay you because you have to pay for me to continue using it. But for things like Photoshop or an IDE, right? I'm using all my own resources. All you're doing is keeping a license server up.
Yeah, I mean, you have to assume that they are spending a lot of money like improving the product. If they don't do that, then you're absolutely right. It's just you're throwing money away. But presumably your, $10 a month or whatever it is allows them to hire some engineers to work on it. But I guess
the costs aren't typically that drastically different, right? Like in the short term, theoretically, right? Because if I pay you $100 once and I buy your new software every year, or I pay you $10 every month, like it's roughly equivalent.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
The big difference for me is just like if I stop paying, I can't if I'm happy with what I have for now, I can't just continue to use it without paying.
Right. But to be fair, there's a barrier of entry. Like if I try JetBrains and I don't like it, I can cancel and I only paid 1 month.
No, I understand.
If I have to pay $300, then I might just never try it. So yeah, they have to do some kind of shareware version.
There's a lot of like 30-day trials, right?
Yeah, right.
That's a common thing.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely with you. I mean, anything that's been a subscription. I'm trying to think of anything. I can't honestly think of anything other than Netflix and Hulu that are, and those don't even really count. Those are more like utilities.
Yeah, video and music, I do, but I don't really. I'm not sure if that's a great idea for me or not. Like I'm not fully sold that it's a great idea. I feel
like those are basically like utilities. I mean, the difference between, say Spotify and JetBrains is that Spotify is, presumably putting out new content all the time and you're paying for the content.
Well, and they're not responsible for getting the content, right? Like they have to sign it, but like the artists and stuff are making the content. They just have to make sure to keep doing the deals.
Right. And the deals cost money, hence the subscription. Like, otherwise,
but I guess the point is like if I really like this IDE and I pay and again, this specific IDE is really kind of irrelevant. I don't use it, so maybe it's a bad thing to pick.
No, I think it's good. It's a good discussion.
Is that like if I really like where it's at and I don't just particularly want to pay for it right now, like I don't need to upgrade, I'm happy where it is and I just want to keep using it, I don't have that option.
That's true. Yep, that's true.
So like this is what I do for some Adobe products. Like I have Lightroom for my pictures, but I'm not on the newest one. I'm on like several versions ago.
Yeah, I have the same thing with Illustrator.
Like I'm happy with what it is right now. Like I don't need to upgrade.
Yeah, the whole Adobe Creative Cloud thing, I just can't deal with it. Like the idea that because this is a problem is I don't use Illustrator often enough to make the monthly fee worth it. Like for a product that I'm going to use once every 4 months, I can't justify spending $50 a month. It's ridiculous.
But you could justify buying. I think it cost me like $100 when I bought it.
Right. Yeah.
But I've used it for 2 or 3 years.
Yep. Yeah. I bought Illustrator before the whole cloud thing. I think it was like $200, and the same thing. I've been using it for, I don't know, 6 years or something. Anyway, so the other thing, last thing about that is, people think that, so this is about the subscription thing. People think, oh, if I get this IDE, I'm going to be paying for it forever. This goes to like a psychological thing. People generally feel like they don't change. I don't know if you read this article, but people feel like they change way less than they actually do. So they did this study. They surveyed a bunch of 20-year-olds and said, 10 years from now, will you like the same style of music that you do now?
Oh.
And the majority said yes. And then they interviewed a bunch of 30-year-olds and said, do you still like the same music you did 10 years ago? And almost 90% of them said no. And then they thought, okay, well, maybe 20-year-olds just don't get it, right? So they did the same thing to 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, and every single generation did the same thing. Every generation felt like, even 60-year-olds felt like they wouldn't change when they were 70, and they changed. And so with respect to subscriptions, I always feel like I'm going to be paying for this forever. Like BitTorrent Sync, I feel like, I'm going to be paying, $10 a month for the next 20 years, or maybe not that extreme, but when really so what you actually pay versus what you get for subscription versus one-time fee, your brain doesn't process that correctly. And so that makes subscriptions an even worse idea. Anyway, so time for Book of the Show.
Oh, Book of the Show. Oh,
So my Book of the Show is a Kickstarter project, so it hasn't materialized yet, although I'm eagerly waiting it. It's a remake of Paranoia.
Can we still join, or are you just teasing us with something we can't join?
Good question. So I asked the person running the project if people could still join, because the project has already been funded and it's over from that perspective. But he said yes. He said just email me or message him through Kickstarter and give him some information and PayPal him $50 and you can join. So basically, even though you can't join through Kickstarter, you can still get the book. So the book is Paranoia RPG. It's a remake. So Paranoia RPG is a book that came out a long time ago. It's a game book. So it's kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, these other ones. But this one, the catch is you're sitting around at this table playing with these other people. One of the person is a game master, so just like D&D. But each person has a secret mission, and the secret mission is always destructive. Like my secret mission might be get Patrick killed as many times as possible. Patrick's secret mission might be like fail this one part of the mission. And so the way the game works is instead of rolling dice, you roll dice too, but in addition to rolling dice, every time you take an action, everybody passes a card to the game master. And most of the cards are empty. So you start off with a handful of cards. Maybe, 20 of them are empty. but you have 3 of them that say automatically fail whatever action you're doing right now. And you have 3 of them that say automatically succeed. And so if Patrick is, trying to turn on the shield generator, and my mission is get Patrick killed as many times as possible, and he's under fire from enemies, then I will pass my, Patrick fails this roll card. But because everyone's passing a card, Patrick doesn't know what I did. He doesn't know it was me who did that, at least not right away. And so, so that's kind of the whole point is like, but one thing is like, if you fail the entire mission, then everybody loses. So it's sort of like you have to limp along through the mission, just stabbing each other in the back as many times as possible without going overboard and losing the mission. So it really takes the whole D&D experience and makes it really exciting. Like I played a little bit of D&D and I could never really get into it, but this I just absolutely loved. It's the thing is it's really dated, especially being sort of a sci-fi theme book. It's definitely showing its age. So this Kickstarter is a way to rewrite it, for a modern audience, and I'm really looking forward to it.
My book was going to be Red Planet by Kim Stanley Robinson. That was the one I was terribly foreshadowing last time by saying I wasn't that into it. Turned out the book ended and I still wasn't that into it. And so I've decided not to give you that as a recommendation. If you're interested in a really long-form, dry discussion of terraforming on Mars and economics of that, and
hey, there's water on Mars, so we could do that now.
Which is something this book talks about.
Oh, great.
And Elon Musk talking about nuclear bombing Mars as a way to kickstart terraforming is also something kind of they talk about in the book.
Okay.
So the book is, it's accurate and interesting in that regard. It's a pretty long book for that. Anyways.
Got it.
So instead, I'm not finished with the book. I'm about halfway through it, but I'm really enjoying it thus far. And that's John Scalzi's relatively new book, Lock In. And this book is about a near future where people get a flu or flu-like virus that alters their brain and makes them paralyzed. Oh. And kind of like there's a whole portion of society that becomes locked in where they can't move. And they have to do everything kind of virtually or like through the use of like Android robots.
Oh, wow.
So that's not spoiling. That's like literally like the first 5 pages of the book.
No, yeah. That makes sense. That's
so anyways,
cool.
It's really
awesome.
Interesting. And I'm actually listening to this book on Audible. And if you're interested in trying Audible, which a lot of people have been doing, so
great.
Send us in like what you are listening to with your Audible free book. And you can go to audibletrial.com/programming throwdown, all one word, lowercase for programming throwdown. So that's audibletrial.com/programming throwdown. You can get a free book, and we get a little bit of something to help us keep the show running. And you get a book for free that you get to keep, even if you cancel your subscription. I have 1 book a month that I get, and I always find something awesome to listen to. They have tons and tons and tons of books, even if some of them are real like losers, like Red Mars.
Yeah, you don't have to pay per book.
If you really like it, interested, but yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, very cool.
It was better than sitting listening to music again on my drive into work.
Yeah, right. There's only so many chiptunes on Spotify.
Hey, you listen to that channel too?
Yeah, I love that channel.
What was the new one I got? It was something very strange. I'll have to think of what it was.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's like disco EDM or something.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I was
All
like,
right, that sounds
okay,
cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, time for tool of the show.
To tool of the show. So my tool of the show, there's a pair of tools.
What? That's not fair.
I know, totally cheating. The first is Image Magic. Now this is Image Magic, like the British version. So it's Magick, Image Magic, and it is a library for working with images, and it has 1 billion different bindings. I haven't checked, but I'm pretty sure there is a Ruby binding. Let me check right now.
Oh, yes, there is.
There is R-Magic. Yes, so there's actually 2. So yeah, there's Image Magic is ubiquitous. Just everyone uses Image Magic. If you're doing things with images, it's great. Also, FFmpeg It's in the same vein as ImageMagick for videos. Despite the name, it does way more than MPEG. It does WMV, it does AVI, it does MP4, which I said it's MPEG, but it does everything. And it's ubiquitous. It's bindings for every language. So if you need to work with images or you need to work with video, you're going to be using ImageMagick or FFmpeg. And they're just like brutally difficult to, kind of compile yourself. And if you wanted to, like, I remember one time I spent just almost a month getting FFmpeg to even build on Windows. Hopefully a lot of that is better now.
I've done this. I have experience with FFmpeg. There's like a series, just like a zip of executables you can download.
Yeah, that's right. So definitely, they're huge monolithic projects. Don't try and build it yourself if you don't have to. Fortunately, most people don't have to because there are just bindings for everything. So check them out. They're great. I've used them for so many different projects. We had a thing recently where we were doing some machine learning on videos, and we wanted to sort of put some instrumentation, just draw some instrumentation on the video, like annotate the video. And we used FFmpeg to do that, and it came out really nicely.
Two things I use FFmpeg for are taking a video and converting it to stills, so like every frame to its own file.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I took, it's really weird and cheesy, but whatever. I take a time lapse of putting up the Christmas tree each year, and I just take it with like my SLR camera because this is what I'm used to now, although now I'll probably do it with my phone since they've added this feature. I typically take it as a whole bunch of still images, and then I use FFmpeg to smash them all into a video file.
Yep, that makes sense.
And it's just really super easy and straightforward. Much easier than like trying to open a whole bunch of high megapixel images in, like a video editor or something. They tend to bog down.
Yeah, I mean, that would be just brutally painful to do that.
Because it's kind of silly, because a 1080p video is 2 megapixels per frame or whatever, but like an SLR takes like 8 megapixel or 12 megapixel images. So, yeah.
Yeah, is it you get better quality if you downsample something with high optical quality? Does that
So, I don't know, the videos for me turn out really good, and I guess maybe I should try to figure out on my phone. The reason why I do it with my camera is I can put it in fully manual mode, which means the focus stays constant. And
nice.
The settings stay constant.
Yeah, right.
And so then you don't get like weird effects like some frames being focus changing, or when someone walks nearer or farther to the camera, they may go in or out of focus slightly, but at least the whole focus isn't shifting forward and back, which distorts the view slightly.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, so if you have a camera that's taking a certain resolution, what that means are like photons are hitting these cells, and the cell buckets have a certain size. So if you have a higher megapixel, assuming like the aperture size is the same, then you have more smaller buckets, but then you're just averaging those buckets when you downsample. I guess I don't know. I just don't know enough about optics to know. Like, if you take your SLR and downsample it versus just taking pictures with your iPhone, assuming there was some manual mode on your iPhone, I don't know which one's better.
The other thing is, like, I typically take it over the course of, like, a long period of time or 2 long periods of time. And I find phones work great for when you just want to, like, take a short video. But, like, time lapses and stuff, you want to take a long one. I want to adjust the speed. I may want to speed up some parts and slow down others. And I've just never gotten in the knack of being able to do that on my phone.
Yeah, I agree. Cool.
All right.
Very cool.
My tool of the show is Personal Capital.
Okay.
I don't know if you were talking about... No, you talked about something else on another show. I was thinking
I talked about Wealthfront, but I don't think I've ever talked about this.
So Personal Capital is a combination of Wealthfront and Mint.
Ah.
So I don't use... They run both a robo-advisor is what they call it, which is like a way for you to invest money with them and recommended ETFs at low rates or whatever. Okay, but I'm not interested in that part of what they do. But they run also a service that's similar to Mint on top of Yodlee, which is the API backend for connecting to financial services. which is not what Mint uses. Mint rolls their own. So the connectivity is actually a little better in personal capital than Mint. And Mint is really good for like day-to-day spending and kind of not so good, in my opinion, for like investment. So if you have any sort of like money in stocks or, 401k or whatever, personal capital does a much better job of like tracking that. And it'll also give you like, you are currently invested in too many bonds or too much cash or too much whatever, right? According to like, where you should be at your age based on some recommendation, which you may or may not agree with, but it does analysis that I find interesting to see and helpful. And so I recommend that this week.
How does this company stay alive? Like, where do they make their money?
Because they can recommend you services, right? Like, same thing as Mint. They're selling your information at some level, which, yes, you may or may not be comfortable with. But for them, one thing is that they try to get you to, which I didn't feel like the push is very hard, or at least I haven't had it. But for using their, advisory fund thing in which they get some small percentage once you use a certain amount of money. Same thing as Wealthfront, right? Like after so many $1,000s, they get a percent.
Yeah, right.
Not a whole percent, but some fraction of a percent.
Right. But it doesn't look like these guys do the Mint thing in the sense like do they actually connect to your bank and stuff like that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, they do that. Okay.
Yeah.
And your credit card, like they connect to your credit card? Mm-hmm. Okay, because from the front page, it sounds like it's all about just your investments, not really your day-to-day.
No, it does both. But so that's what I was saying, like the day-to-day isn't as good, right? Like Mint is better for that, in my opinion.
Right.
But this is better for the investments, so it's worth using. And
the day-to-day, you kind of have to, the day-to-day you have to look at yourself anyways, right? Like Mint could tell you some things, but really you should just look at your expenses and just say, okay, that's a mistake, or we need to cut down.
Well,
on
I'm really like
something.
using Mint for I have several credit cards or whatever for different purposes, and like it will accumulate them all together for me.
Wait, hold on a second. Why do you have several credit cards?
So I have a high rewards. This is so personal. Whatever. I have a rewards card.
Because I've only ever had one credit card ever since I was like 16 years old. It's been the same.
Well, so there's a
credit
couple
card.
good reasons. If you can control it and this is so off topic for the podcast.
Okay, yeah.
But anyways, basically like a rewards card, but it's an American Express, which isn't accepted everywhere. So then you need to have a second one.
Got it. Okay,
but in general, it's also good to make sure you could have a debit card and a credit card, but you should have at least two somethings in case, one of them has a problem or, gets used somewhere else and they have to lock your account, temporarily.
That's true. There have been a handful of times where there's been an issue with my credit card, and I had no backup. So that's a good point. It's a good point.
So it is good. Anyways, and sorry for that. I don't think personal capital works for all of our listeners who aren't in the U.S. and all those people who may be like, "What? I would like a job," and now you're talking about how to invest money. But one day we can all aspire that we have enough money to invest and worry about. So
I mean, one thing everyone can agree on is that they wish they had done better. Like they'd known more about this when they started, because that's when it matters the most, and that's when you know the least.
Absolutely, and that's where I feel like I'm at, and that's why I guess I try to be. You see those graphs of like every dollar you invest when you're under 30 is worth hundreds of dollars you invest when you're 50.
Right. I actually didn't the first 2 or 3 years I didn't max out my 401k just because I didn't really understand what it meant or anything. So yeah, don't do that, kids. If you can, max out your 401k.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's talk about Ruby.
You sound like a really old guy now. Like, yeah, young whippersnappers.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, guys. I'm not that old, but yeah, there was a couple of years. I've been working.
If you tuned in, this is a programming podcast. We promise.
I've been in industry 11 years, and the first 2 or 3 years I didn't max my 401k. So don't do that. How long have you been in industry? And then we'll talk about Ruby. I'm just curious.
I think I'm at 8 years.
Okay, maybe I'm not at 11 then. Maybe I'm at 10. I don't know. Anyway.
But I did it right after undergrad. I started working because I did my master's degree while I was working.
Okay, got it.
Yep. Anyways, again,
cool. So
off topic.
So Ruby.
So I have a quote. I want to read this quote.
Okay, go for it.
This is related to sort of like background for Ruby. And this is by the inventor, designer, creator, the head honcho guy for Ruby, Matsumoto. Probably saying it wrong. He's Japanese. That's where Ruby comes from. And here's this quote. I really like this. I hope to see Ruby help every programmer in the world to be productive and to enjoy programming and to be happy. That is the primary purpose of the Ruby language.
That's awesome.
He wants us to be happy.
Yeah, I mean, it's way better than Fortran, which wanted missile simulation to be more accurate. Ruby, they want you to be happy. I like that.
I liked it. I thought that was nice.
It's very prophetic.
Wait, well,
cool.
I don't know about it, but anyway, yeah. So anyways, that's some background. So to give you the direction Ruby is coming from, it's supposed to be a happy and productive environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I do think there's a lot of, and this, I promise this is the last rant, but there's a lot of connection between being happy and being productive. And like a lot of people say, oh, I really want my kids to be happy or my spouse to be happy. And it's actually kind of hard to make somebody happy, but you can definitely make someone productive, or at least not make, but you could definitely, it's much easier to give people like advice and direction that makes them more productive. And if that leads to happiness, then there's a much easier way to make people happy than to try to make them happy directly. Anyway.
Okay.
So, so Ruby is, if people don't know, who've never seen Ruby or know anything about Ruby, it's similar to Python. You know, they're both interpreted.
Would you say that's its closest competitor?
I would say Python is definitely the closest competitor. What was the other one you said?
Oh, no, I was going to say. I was just rephrasing, like, closest competitor. I think Python is probably more popular than Ruby, so.
Yeah, I think they're popular and different. Like, Ruby's more popular for web. Like, Python has Django, which is, similar to Ruby on Rails, but, not anywhere near as popular. And when it comes to, like, scientific stuff, Python is just way, way more popular. So, they both have their sort of niches, but they're both interpreted. Ruby was actually number 5 in the RedMonk programming language rankings, which is pretty cool. These guys, they take the number of comments on Stack Overflow and the number of GitHub projects and kind of throw it all together in some algorithm and then spit out the top 21 languages. And Python was number 4, and Ruby was actually tied for number 5 with C++ and C#. I don't really know how you can be tied when they take
that's actually pretty good.
So many things. But yeah, Ruby's definitely up there. So it's a popular language. It's a good one to know about.
But programming language is number 8 is CSS. I don't know.
What? What's wrong with that? There's a lot of CSS out there.
Never mind. Let's just move on.
Okay. I mean, yeah, so
there is a lot of CSS out there. That was not where I was going to go.
You're thinking CSS is more like content than a language?
I know if I look up is CSS Turing complete, the answer is going to be yes.
Of course, but yeah, but I think to your point, there's a lot of CSS that is just describing things. That's really not source code. It's really output, right? I mean, in fact, it literally can be output because there's less and Sass and other programming languages that compile to CSS. And in fact, not that many professional developers write CSS, like raw CSS anymore. It's sort of like saying, oh, the most popular programming language is machine language. But anyway, so one of the things that made Ruby so popular is Ruby on Rails, which is a sort of model view controller web framework written in Ruby. And so I'll kind of talk about that briefly. So MVC framework, model view controller framework, has sort of 3 components. There's the model. The model is usually starts out auto-generated. This is called a object relational model, or ORM. And so you can actually do something in Ruby on Rails called scaffolding and say, writing some very small metadata file, which just says things as simple as like, I have a person, and a person has an age, and a person has a list of phone numbers, and you write in this very compact DSL, and then from that it turns into an entire database, and also a bunch of code to do primitive things with that database, like if I want to fetch a person or write a person, things like that. So the model a lot of it is auto-generated. You may want to do, more specific things than that. You may want to say, get all the people that have updated their profile in the past day. So that's not going to be auto-generated for you. You'll have to write that. That would be part of the model. The view is all just HTML and templates. So the idea is, view might be something like, open tag, header, close tag, hello, and then in brackets, person name, close brackets. And then the controller, which is the third piece, it's responsible for filling in all those brackets. Like it's responsible for knowing what person name means. It uses the functions you wrote in the model to go and fetch people, and then tell the view, this is the information you need. So I don't know if Ruby on Rails was the first MVC framework, but it's definitely the most popular by far. There's a ton of tutorials and other references, which we'll talk about at the end. And it's pretty cool. With the scaffolding, it actually supports different databases, which is pretty awesome. You can actually prototype your website using SQLite, just running on your machine without any database service, and then copy your Ruby on Rails project over to your server, which is running MySQL, and run the exact same code on that server, and it just magically works. It's pretty cool.
Magically, it's the magic of scaffolding. So Ruby on Rails is totally awesome. It might be a bit dated now. I don't know how well it's maintained. I definitely don't hear about it as much as I used to. But I've used it for a few projects. It's phenomenal. I think also it got promoted to Ruby on Rails was really pushed a lot by the why did the name just 43 why did the name just escape me? Oh no, brain meltdown. Oh well. One of the things that Ruby I think is popular because of is also it supports a lot of different ways of programming. So Python also has this as an advantage. Like you could do scripting in Python, or you can write object-oriented stuff in Python.
Yep.
And Ruby has a similar thing where it really does support lots of different ways. It just tries to get out of your way and allow you to do lots of stuff in a very flexible manner, so that you can write in Ruby different codes for different different coding styles for different problems.
Yeah, and this is one place where Ruby does better than Python. Like in Python, a class is handled in a really goofy way. I mean, basically a class is just a collection of functions. And I mean, I'm not going to get this right because it's very nuanced, but under the hood in Python, a class is just like kind of an afterthought, and it was kind of hacked on there. But in Ruby, classes are totally kind of their own entity, and they're handled in a much more elegant way. Another thing with Ruby is you could do really elegant metaprogramming. So in other words, if you have a class and the class is a list of methods, and you want to get the method names of the class, so the actual function names, you can do that pretty easily. Like you can enumerate all of the methods for a given object and things like that. You could do this in Python. Any object has a dot __ dict __ object or property, and using that property you can fetch. You can do metaprogramming in Python, but it's definitely, as I said before, it's definitely kind of an afterthought or some hacky thing that probably wasn't intended in the beginning to be a big part of Python. But in Ruby, that's kind of like a first-class citizen in the sense like they kind of thought about that from the beginning. And that's one of the reasons why Ruby is so good for domain-specific languages.
Which we did have a request to talk about, and we will in the future.
Yep. Yeah, definitely.
But briefly, it's like a new language you define, but you're not trying to do everything. Like you're not really writing a whole language. Well, you are, but you're not writing a language to do everything, not a general purpose language, a very domain-specific, something for a specific niche, a specific application. So like scripting an AI in a video game, right? Like you may want to have a configuration language for doing that, that actually gets executed, but it doesn't need to necessarily be Turing complete, or does it need to be it may look a lot like Ruby, and Ruby supports that really well. It has a lot of them because of this really good meta programming, reflection, introspection.
Yep. I mean, you might want a DSL that's very specific so that you can make a lot of assumptions about the DSL. Like, for example, in Ruby on Rails, there's a DSL for defining your model. And they make a lot of assumptions. And based on those assumptions, they can turn your model into, SQL commands. They can't just turn generic Ruby code into SQL commands. That would be too hard. So the DSL tightens the assumptions on the language, and because of that, lets you do really cool things. One of the cons about Ruby, it's a double-edged sword here. So take con with a grain of salt, but it's dynamically typed and it's interpreted. And so what that means is, if you spell something wrong, variable name wrong, if you change a function to accept a string instead of a number, and you didn't change all the places that use that function, you're not going to find out about that until you run the code. So if you're talking about, say, Homebrew, which is the Mac package manager that's written in Ruby, where you just like hit some command and then after a minute it's done, that doesn't really matter. It's like now you found out about the bug after 50 seconds instead of 2 seconds or something. So it's not that big a deal. But if you're building a website, there might be bugs that you don't find out about for a month, and then they just start crashing and you don't know why. And there's a really interesting Stack Overflow question about why Twitter switched from Ruby to Scala. And the short answer is just that. Like they ran into too many problems where everything looks good, and then at 2 a.m, some code path gets executed that hadn't been before, and things just start crashing. And so with Scala, if someone fat fingers a variable and spells it wrong, or if they change a function without letting everybody know, Scala just tells you right away before you deploy that code.
So are they still using Scala? I don't actually know.
Twitter?
I know they were. Yeah, I know they were trying to use it for a fair amount of stuff before. But are they using it for everything? Are they still doing it?
Good question. So I used to talk to a lot of people at Twitter. A lot of those people now aren't at Twitter anymore. So it's hard for me to really know. Definitely as of a year ago, or as of 2 years ago, they were definitely using Scala for almost everything. I heard, actually, so I did hear sort of friend of a friend kind of thing. So take this with a grain of salt. But I did hear that they were moving away from Scala. I don't know why, but maybe there's performance issues or something. I don't know. I do know Scala takes a very long time to compile. So I don't know if that was why. But yeah, I'm sure there's still a ton of code there written in Scala. So
also, Ruby just really never got adoption in scientific uses, which is something Python got like huge adoption for using.
Yep.
So there's a lot of really good examples and libraries for doing scientific computation, high precision math, that kind of stuff in Python. And it's just like, I'm sure there's no reason you couldn't do it in Ruby, but you're just not going to be going down the path of least resistance as far as having other people who have already done it.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do something scientific, just write a Python web service and have Ruby call it. I mean, don't try and do scientific stuff in Ruby. It's just going to be painful. So just for people who don't know, like a lot of these scientific, like matrix optimization, matrix, operations and things like that, they really have to be done in C or even Fortran. And so Python just has a bunch of bindings to those languages. And really the cool part about NumPy, SciPy, these libraries are all of the C code that you don't have to write. So you can't just take the scientific libraries in Python and port them to Ruby. It won't be that easy. So yeah, that's definitely one area that wouldn't be fun to do in Ruby. So, and you don't have to. You could definitely use both of these languages together.
Yep. A great learning resource, which I think both Jason and I did. I never finished it, but I did do a fair amount of it. Was the
Yeah, I
Rails
also
for
didn't
Zombies.
finish, but I did
We're
about half
terrible
of it.
people. All these MOOCs, which I guess isn't exactly a MOOC, but sort of similar. Railsforzombies.org. And this is an interactive online tutorial, which was one of the very first ones I saw done like this. Now I see them all the time, but the very first ones I remember distinctly seeing was this one. And it takes you through all of the kind of steps of bringing up a Ruby on Rails website. And it has a kind of funny theme with zombies. And it was a fun time. And it's also educational for what is developing a Ruby on Rails app look like.
Yeah, I also did about half of it. I thought it was great. Definitely check this out.
Why didn't you finish? No,
Good question.
I'm just teasing.
No, I mean, I'm thinking about it. I don't really know.
It's a pot calling the kettle black.
Actually, okay, I know why I didn't finish. I remember. It's because I got halfway through and I learned as much as I needed to know to build the site, and then I just started doing real work. That's what happened. So it's actually, I would say, it was a win for them. Like they got me to the point where I was productive. So
nice.
Yeah, so definitely check it out if you want to be productive in Rails. You have two people here who took this class and then did some cool Rails stuff. So yeah, check it out.
Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah, just a couple of meta things. Oh, first let's recap for people who skipped to the end.
Yeah.
Book of the show.
Probably a good idea. There was a lot of ranting this episode.
Yeah, book of the show is Paranoia RPG, and Patrick's is Lock-In. Tool of the show, I did Image Magic, FFmpeg, and Patrick did Personal Capital. So one thing we've had, we're still like kind of dealing with some hosting provider issues and things like that. We changed hosting providers, and some people in Russia, I got an email from someone in Russia who can't access it because the hosting provider is banned in Russia. I have no idea why. I'm pretty sure it has nothing to do with us.
Because all those nasty things we said about the Russian government. No, we did not say anything bad about the Russian government.
Yeah, all those like Vladimir Putin jokes we've been making.
Stop.
So I don't know. So I'm sure it has something to do more with the domain, the top level domain, and nothing to do with programming throwdown. But nonetheless, we're banned in Russia, which is kind of cool. Yeah, go us. I am going to host the podcast like an alternate place on S3. I did a lot of research into RSS. There's actually no way in the RSS feed for me to specify two sites. No one ever thought of that as a reasonable use case. So I actually cannot, fix the iTunes or the RSS or any of that. The best I can do is provide, just a download link on www.programmingthrowdown.com. So that's what I'll do. If you can't access the podcast and you're not in Russia, let us know. Because as far as I know, Russia is the only country in which we're banned. But there could be others. So if your buddy's telling you what a great episode and you can't listen to it, your buddy should let us know.
Your buddy should just send you the file.
Yeah, and let us know. So, but basically you can go to the website. I'm going to have alternate download links as soon as possible. So,
all right, I think that's a wrap.
Cool. All right, guys, have a good one, and keep sending us those emails. They're awesome. Thanks for all of your support on Patreon. Actually, the Patreon is growing. Let me see what it's at. The Patreon is at $22 an episode. So thank you, guys.
Wow, nice. Thanks,
that is
guys.
Awesome. Thanks for supporting us on Patreon. We really appreciate that. That's awesome. And thanks for checking out the books that we recommend and all that good stuff. Send us lots of email. Thanks for Yaroslav, Ash Booth, and Quang Nguyen for the questions and comments. And we'll catch you guys next month.
The intro music is Axo by Binar Pilot. Programming Throwdown is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Share-alike 2.0 license. You're free to share, copy, distribute, transmit the work, to remix, adapt the work, but you must provide attribution to Patrick and I, and share alike in kind.